Hello everyone and welcome back to my channel, Tomcat Stitchery. I'm Whitney, here with Gidget, moving around, and we're here for another Sunday Sew Along, and if you've been following along the channel, you know that I'm going through a series of zipper tutorials. So last week I did an invisible zipper and put that into the back of a lined dress. This week I am doing a slot zipper, and actually I have the skirt that we're making here, which is basically this. It's kind of an invisible zipper, but you can, it's not as, obviously not as invisible as an invisible zipper, but this is kind of an older technique that they would have used pre-invisible zippers. Invisible zippers aren't that old. So yeah, but it is top stitched on either side. That's what keeps it in place. So there you have it. Invisible zippers can be finicky and a little bit tricky, but especially when it comes to thicker fabrics or hairier fabrics that have a lot of like raveling issues or looser threads, looser weaves that things can get caught in the zippers. Invisible zippers do not like any kind of thread impeding their track. They will break, they will quit working, they will throw a fit, and then you get stuck in a dress or skirt or whatever. So this is an option if you're using a thicker material such as corduroy, which is what the skirt I'm making. That's, you keep seeing the inside, that's the, you can't see that when it's on, but that's the inside that I've made. This is the Delphine skirt by Tilly and the Buttons. It is in her very first book, the Love at First Stitch. It's just a simple A-line skirt pattern. I'm showing you the back. It's just a simple A-line skirt pattern. I had this corduroy that I've been wanting to make a little A-line skirt out of it. I had just a remnant of this. I thrifted it actually. Love the color. It's this kind of a burgundy rusty color. And I have lengthened the waistband because I wanted to show you guys how to do a zipper that goes not through a waistband but up to, and then I've got the overlapping waistband that's got the two hook and bars there. So this could work if you were doing an invisible zipper on the inside of the skirt, on the back of the skirt as well, or if you're doing it on the side of the skirt. I've had a lot of questions on how to rotate a zipper from the side to the back and vice versa. When it comes to pants and skirts, all you have to do, the seam allowances are the same. All you have to do is literally sew it into the side seam or the back seam. You can do whichever you want. And it really doesn't matter if it comes with, you know, a waistband that has like back waistbands and a front waistband where you have a seam in the center, or the same with facings. You will need to adjust that a little bit. Number one, you're probably gonna, if you're moving it from back to center, you're probably gonna wanna cut your back out on a fold if it's a skirt. Obviously if it's pants, you still have to have a seam there. But you'll want to adjust your facing pieces accordingly. Actually, if it's pants, because you're not gonna be messing with the facings anyway, as long as you have a seam on the side seam, you're good to go. You can always add a seam to the side seam if you don't have one. But with skirts, you may want to cut the back on the fold and then just rotate everything. So take the seam allowance out of center back so you can cut that on the fold. Do the same with the facings and or waistband, and then just move that, if there isn't a seam allowance, into the side seam. Make sure you add that. And that's really all you have to do. It's very, very easy. Now, moving a zipper in a dress, moving it from a side seam to a back seam is very simple. Just sew it into the back. You do, most time when dresses have side zippers, it's because there's something going on with the collar though. A lot of times, not always, but a lot of times. So definitely take a look to see if it's possible to put a center back zip, or if you even want one, you know, if it has to go up into a collar or whatever. I personally do not like side zip dresses. Sometimes it's necessary. I do have one that I made not that long ago. I just find them really hard to get in and out of, especially with boobs. They just don't open up as much as one in the back does. But yes, it's a little different if you're moving from back though to a side on a dress, especially if you are doing something with a sleeve. It's a little different too. Well, not really. Very rarely do you have a side zip that goes all the way up into the armpit, even if it's a sleeveless dress. Most of the time it stops just short of the sleeve, and then, you know, it just opens up enough for you to like wiggle it on over your head or whatever. So I can definitely talk more about that if you want. But basically when you're putting a zipper into the side of a dress, it's kind of like putting it into a welt pocket, kind of. most of the time it's a invisible zipper that you're doing that to. But anyway, if you do want to see how to put in a side zipper on the side of a dress, I might be able to add that onto the end. I may do just a few more of these zipper tutorials, like, I don't know, 3 or 4 more, and then take a break and do a few other things, and then come back and do some of the more advanced ones. I'll definitely cover like exposed zippers now. I'm doing lap zippers next week, but I can definitely still do an exposed zipper, and I could do like a welt zipper, to where you can see how to do that in a pocket. Or maybe I'll wait and do that. Here, I'm just thinking on the fly. Maybe I'll wait and do that one later and do maybe like an invisible zipper in a seam, which is what you would do on the side of a dress. Or I had a couple people asking about putting it into like princess seams. They have a couple of ready-to-wear jackets that have the princess seams. So maybe I'll do that one. And then we'll take a break and come back to zippers again later. So that's kind of the thought process. Okay, also had questions on zippers. When to use nylon versus metal teeth zippers. A while back, you used to be able to buy this type of zipper. I grabbed a dark color, I don't know why, with metal teeth. Now they come with the nylon teeth, or plastic teeth. This is a non-separating, I think it's a 7-inch zipper. I bought like a color pack of it from Wall-Wack, just a whole bunch of the zippers. Yeah, and I'm almost out of this size, and then I've got colors. I like to buy typically my, and this is a number 3. This is a number 3 nylon coiled zipper. I like to usually buy them much longer because if I'm gonna cut a zipper off, I always do it from the top. I always leave the bottoms alone and cut it off from the top, and I prefer my zippers to be a little bit long. I mean, obviously putting like a 22-inch zipper into a pair of pants or the back of a skirt is a little excessive. You're cutting off a lot of zipper tape, but you know, having some that are more like the 12-inch to 16-inch and then having some longer ones for dresses like a 22 to 26 is my preference. But yeah, I always cut off from the top, and I like to leave my zippers long because I do like to cut them off at the top. I find I get a better finish that way. So as far as metal teeth, typically now most metal teeth zippers are coat zippers or jean zippers. They're a little bit thicker, usually a number 5. You can find them different sizes, but that's kind of the standard. So I mean, really the only time I use metal zippers would maybe be for an exposed zipper if I just wanted something kind of cool, a jacket zipper, or jeans. Everything else I just use regular nylon coil, whether that be in a standard zipper or in an invisible zipper. So wanted to answer that question too. All right, let's get to the tutorial. You're gonna need an extra product this week other than the interfacing strips. You're gonna see the interfacing strips going into the back, each side of the side seam or the zipper seam where the zipper's going every week, because I always interface the areas my zippers are going into. But this week we're actually going to be using a product called Wonder Tape. If you're not familiar, it's a double-sided tape that washes away once the garment has been washed, and we are going to use that for this application today. So I have that link down below. There's a link to Wall-Wack, and yeah, that's all I have. Let me know down below if you have any questions, and I will see you guys again next Sunday for the lap zipper, but then of course regular videos per normal on Tuesday and Friday this week. Have a good one, everyone. Bye. Okay, so today we are going to do our slotted zipper. All right, so we have got our 2 backs here. Now I've not put anything together. This skirt has a center back seam, and this is the Delphine skirt by Tilly and the Buttons, and I'm using a corduroy fabric. So this is a little thicker fabric, which makes it a perfect candidate for the slot zipper. The slot zipper is basically the way they would do an invisible zipper, other than a lap zipper. That kind of is an invisible zipper as well, but this is kind of the way you would do an invisible zipper before invisible zippers were invented. So a little bit older technique, but still it's great for thicker fabrics, thicker wools, corduroys, that kind of thing, because invisible zippers can be finicky. And this is a great technique. So center back seam, I have my strips of interfacing fused. I have my seams finished. Both of my seams have been finished here with a serger. And I have, oh gosh, this is either a 7 or a 9-inch zipper. Now, I have a very, very small waist to a hip ratio, and if I have too long of a zipper in my skirt, I can't even keep my skirt up long enough to like hook it. Like, it makes it really hard for me to get a skirt on. So I actually prefer a little bit smaller zipper. I mean, I need a zipper in order because my hips are bigger than my waist, but just not by much. So I'm actually going to be shortening it. So I'm going to show you how to how I do this type of zipper application, but also we're going to keep the zipper long, and then I'm going to be putting a waistband in here, and this would be the same for the invisible zipper if you didn't want the zipper to go all the way through the waistband, if you wanted it to stop at the top of the, or at the bottom of the waistband, and then have an overlap for the waist seam, the waistband, which is my preference for invisible zippers, and also this way too. I hate when zippers go up through the waistband because it's hard. So that's what we'll be showing you today. So the first thing, showed you how we've prepped things. What I'm going to do is I'm actually going to mark where I want my zipper to stop. And I think I'm just going to go right about there. Just going to kind of play around with it. A little arbitrary, but playing around with it. So I've marked right there, that pink line. That's where I want my zipper, the bottom of my zipper to go. So now what I'm going to do, and I'm going to do this off camera just because it's easy, but I'm going to start at the top and I'm going to stitch here with a basting stitch, back stitch, and then stitch all the way down the rest of the back of the skirt with my regular 2.5 stitch. So baste from the top to this mark, back stitch, switch to the smaller stitch, stitch from here all the way down to the bottom of the skirt, and I'll be right back here. Okay, so like I said, I have basted from the top to the pink mark, back stitched, and then stitched with a regular stitch length all the way to the base of the skirt. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to press this open. Again, this is corduroy, so I'm going to be very careful. And honestly, if you take, I don't have one right here, but if you take a scrap of the corduroy, like offcuts, and wrap it around like your pressing things, it helps not crush the nap. But I'm just going to, turn on my iron first of all, very carefully press that open. And again, my tape is 1 1/4 inches, so when no, I must have done smaller. Ideally, when it folds over on itself, it covers it. This is obviously an unlined skirt because it's just a corduroy skirt. Okay. All right, so once we have our seam all nice and pressed in, or pressed open, we're gonna deal with our zipper here really quickly. Okay, so I'm gonna set my skirt aside. So what we want is, this is Drit's Wonder Tape. Can you kind of see that? And what I'm going to do, this stuff is great for putting in zippers. In fact, I used to use this all the time when I did my invisible zippers a different way, but the way I showed you guys last week is by far my favorite. So basically, you've got tape that is stuck to itself here. All right, so you've got, it's double stick tape basically. So I'm just gonna, I have it in a plastic bag just because that helps keep it from drying out. But what I'm gonna do is I'm just going to put this, not all the way to the top because I don't need it all the way to the top, but I'm just pressing this down onto the zipper tape on both sides. Like so. And then you want to get that pressed down really, really well so that tape is nice and sticky. But now we are going to, let me move all this stuff so it doesn't get in the way. Woo. We're going to put this down. So obviously I put this tape, this is the right side of the zipper, so the zipper is facing up. That is important. You want it on the correct side. So my zipper tape is facing up, and I'm going to lay my skirt out here. And I'm just going to do this one side at a time just to, so that the stickiness doesn't get away from me. But I'm going to find that spot here where I backstitched. And I can see my pink line went away because it needed to. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take the tape off of just one side of this, and it should leave, that's basically a glue, and it's a wash away glue. And now I'm going to line up the bottom of my zipper with where I quit sewing. And I am lining the center of my teeth up with the center of that seam. Giving it a good press. And then I'm going to take the tape off of the other side, like so, and just give it a good press down. Okay. So there we have it. So it is, the zipper is wrong side down on top of the seam, and I've centered the zipper teeth over that seam line, starting the base of it right where I switched my stitch length. Okay, so now we are going to go and actually top stitch this in place at the sewing machine. So let's go on over there. Okay, so now we're at the sewing machine. Grab that. I have my zipper foot on here. I've got coordinating thread with my fabric, and here is my zipper. Obviously everything's closed. This is the plus of using a zipper that's too long. You can keep everything closed and you're not trying to sew around a the actual, oh my gosh, zipper pull. That's what I'm trying to say. Okay, so what I'm going to do now, so everything is like glued in place basically. Now I have a nap, and the nap goes down this way because I am using corduroy. So I'm actually going to be starting from the top of each side, sewing down. I can feel where my stop here at the bottom is, but if you want to mark that with a pen, you more than welcome to. Here, I'll do that so you guys can see where it is. Just like when you're sewing like with a fly on your jeans. Just kind of mark that so then you know you don't want to hit that with your sewing machine needle. So there's the end of my zipper stop. So what we're going to do is I'm going to start, and I'm actually going to go down this side first, just with a regular stitch length. And I mean, I can feel, I want to be stitching, I'm stitching obviously top stitching through everything, through the seam allowance, through the zipper tape, and I can feel where that those teeth are, and I really want to ride my zipper foot right along those teeth. So now I'm just going to sew down, and I'm sewing with the nap here, and that's where my stop is. So now I'm going to turn and do a right angle, but I'm going to go right into that seam line, and then I'm gonna backstitch. Okay, because I want to start at the top and go down again so that I'm not fighting the nap. So now I'm going down the other side. Now I do like this zipper method for thicker fabrics. I think it works really well, and it's so much less frustrating than invisible zippers. And if you have a color that coordinates with your fabric, you're good to go. Okay, so there we go. So I basically, and you can kind of see that, you can kind of fluff that up a little bit, but that's why I sewed down, because I didn't want anything going against the nap there. So I've basically just sewn a box around that stitch. So now I can go in with my seam ripper, which is right here. And now we can open that up. So now that this is nice and opened up, serger thread. I mean, you'll want to clean that up because I've got little threadies there. But now when we go through it should unzip like so. And you've got a nice hidden-ish zipper. So yeah, I mean, it's a little pain in the rear end to have to go back and pull your little threadies out, especially if you have a fabric like mine that's a magnet for said threads. But I mean, basting that shut just really makes the world of difference in making it so much easier to, especially if you're using something that can creep like a corduroy or a fabric with a nap. Okay, so there we go. So now the zipper is in. So now what I'm going to do, and I'm going to leave the top still attached. I'm going to go ahead and sew my skirt side, the side seams together, and I'm going to put on, I'll come back when I put on the waistband and show you how we're going to finish that off. So let me get to that point and I'll be right back. Okay, my skirt is basically together. Oh, pinched between my tripod, basically together. And now I'm going to put the waistband on. Now the waistband is in two pieces. I've got an outer waistband and then like an inside waistband or waistband facing. So yeah, we're gonna, and because this is corduroy, my outer waistband I've done in the fabric, obviously, because that's what you'll see. But then I've done the inner waistband in this scrap of linen that I had that I thought might be a fun pop of color on the inside. And this is the piece that's interfaced, is my facing. Mostly because I didn't want to mess with trying to fuse too much interfacing to my corduroy because it's corduroy and it can be finicky with the iron, but also because it's thicker, I decided to do the inside instead. Okay. So because, oops, sorry, this pattern, and most patterns that want you to go take the zipper all the way up through the waistband, obviously the waistband would end on either side of that seam, and we need to have an overlap. So what I've done is I've just extended the center back, or the back pieces, the back waistband pieces, 2 inches on each side. So an extra 4 inches, which is probably well more than I need. I just wanted to make sure that I had enough because that's very easy to cut off at the end. So what we're going to do now is I'm going to pin this right sides together to the top of the skirt, and I've got notches that I'm matching. Hold on. Do I have that upside down? I do have that upside down. I have notches that I'm matching, and then also my waist or my side seams that I'm matching. So I'm just, at this point, I'm actually going to unzip this, but I'm leaving all that excess tape at the top. So I'm going to unzip that, and I'm just going to be matching up my notches. And my side seams. I want those to match up pretty darn well, so I'm just going to stick a pin through those. Try and keep those nice and matched up. And then I've got a couple of notches here on the front. Ooh, did I not mark that? That was not smart of me. There's the center notch, though. I always mark a center notch when I'm cutting things out on the fold. Just another thing to match, especially if you forget to cut the notch into the top of the skirt. All right. Okay, so now once everything is pinned, once we have everything pinned all the way around, we're going to sew this to the top of the skirt. All right, now let's talk about zippers a little bit. Now, the zipper that I'm using here is a nylon zipper, which actually you can get away, the sewing machine goes over a nylon zipper much easier than it goes over a metal zipper. So, I mean, just keep that in mind. You can still hand crank it if you want, just so you don't, I mean, a needle hitting that will definitely damage the needle. So just want to be careful when you're sewing around the zipper. But let's go over here. And I want to sew, I think I'll sew with my zipper with the skirt up. It doesn't really matter since neither of these are actually, no, I want to sew with the skirt because the skirt does have a little bit of a curve and the top of it and the waistband is pretty straight. So turn this inside out. All right. So right now I'm just sewing this to the top of the skirt. So we're not going to worry about any overlaps or any of that jazz. Oh, I just unthreaded my needle again. All right, so we're starting at center back. Make sure that your zipper is lying flat like it should be. And this pattern uses 5/8 of an inch seam allowances. So that's what we'll be using at the top of this waistband. All right, so I'm actually going to start, I think, off just on the waistband fabric just for a little bit, since I'm coming, you know, you're starting right on that zipper. And then if you want to just hand crank the wheel over the zipper just to make sure you don't hit anything, you can do that. And now make sure those seam allowances are staying open when I hit that join. Okay, once we get back around, just want to make sure that that's lying nice, that zipper is lying nice and flat again. If you want to hand crank it over. So I've just sewn off. I mean, there's nothing that I'm sewing to. It's just sewing off onto that fabric. Okay, so there we have that. Now, I'm still not going to cut my zipper tape off. So now what I want to do is go and press the seam allowances up into the waistband. So I'm going to go do that real quick. And then we're going to attach our facing and create our overlap and underlap. I will be right back. Okay, let's talk about the overlap and the underlap. So my waistband is on. Obviously, I just need to finish off the waistband. So now this zips up to the waistband, and then ideally we will have a overlap. Now again, this works for invisible zippers just as well. So, you know, this actually isn't too bad of an overlap. If I may trim a little bit off. It doesn't really need to be quite as much as that. Obviously, some seam allowances will be coming off. But I mean, you could. And what I suggest is that you sew a hook and eye onto one side. Now, what I'm going to do with this one, instead of having like an underlap, and you could leave the underlap and the overlap the same, and then just have like a hook and eye on this side, on this side, and then again over here. But that's a little intense. So I'm actually going to finish off the underlap side, and you can pick whichever one is most comfortable for you, whichever one you want to be the underlap side. Mine's going to be the left side of the skirt when worn. I'm going to finish it off with the zipper, and then have this one, I will probably just leave it the way it is, because then once it's finished off, it will hook there. Okay, so hopefully that makes sense. So what I'm going to do now is we are going to attach our waistband facing. to our waistband. And I'm just going to pin it all along the top of the skirt here, because we're sewing this to there. Okay, I'm going to unzip this again just so it's easier to maneuver around things. Okay, I'm going to do this in 2 passes. I'm trying to decide what the best way to do is. So we're going to finish this off kind of burrito style. So what we want to do, I've pinned this up here. We're going to sew it to the seam line just a little bit and up, and then we'll go and sew the rest of it to the top of the seam line. So what I want to do is I want to turn this up again the way that it was sewn for the actual outer waistband to the front. And then I want to sandwich everything. So this is matching right sides together, but it's the burrito method. So I'm kind of curling that up a little bit under there. I'm only going to sew onto the actual waistband of the skirt here, like maybe an inch. So the waistband facing and the waistband are right sides together, and we've got the zipper here kind of sandwiched between, and you kind of have to twist things in order to make them work that way, which is fine. So we will attach this to the top in a minute. So now we'll be sewing this seam up here, which is the top seam here in a little bit, but for now, just so we can kind of get that things like to buckle a little bit, just so we can get that burrito method, just to get things nice and tight in there. So this is the side that I want the overlap, so I'm not cutting anything off. So I'm just going to start here at the top. Sew at 5/8 of an inch. And I'm sewing with the waistband up because I want to be able to see my previous stitch line. So here's my previous stitch line that I'm coming up to, and I want to make sure I'm sewing either on top of it or right inside of it. And I'm literally just I'm going to stop at this pin here. And then we'll finish off the rest of that later. But then when you flip things right side out, like so, obviously we haven't finished this top seam here, but there we have our overlap that's nice and finished, and we'll poke things out. I just want to make sure that that looks good, and it does right now. And we still need to trim our zipper tape, but okay. So hopefully that makes sense the way we're going to do that. Okay. Now now I'm going to sew my top seam. I mean, things are buckling weird here. Don't worry about that right now. So now I'm just going to sew my top seam. I'm going to sew with my facing on the top because it's interfaced. And now I'm just going to sew all the way across, matching seam lines, making sure things stay pressed open. I probably should have sewn this top seam and then done the burrito, to be honest. I probably just complicated that. Sorry. Tilt you down a little bit more. because we do want to understitch this. I'm just going to take this all the way to the end, even though we're going to cut a lot of that off. Okay, so what I want to do now is, see, and I'm going to have issues because I've already finished off this end. I should have waited to do this part of it, but you know. I am going to understitch the seam allowance to the facing side. Obviously, you can only get in so far. It would have been much better had I not finished that off yet, but I also like to point out that I accidentally sewed my zipper tape up into that top seam allowance. We'll be cutting that off anyway, but okay, so now everything is nice and understitched. Let's go ahead. Sorry. And we're going to cut off our zipper tape just so it's not being a problem. So I'm just going to cut my zipper tape off right about the top of the skirt, so within the seam allowance. Use scissors that you're fine cutting zipper tape. I have dedicated zipper scissors. And cut off that other side. Also, before we do the underlap part, we can cut off. Where are my big scissors? We can go ahead, so the overlap part that we finished already. I'm just going to go ahead and trim corners. And trim that seam allowance. Okay, and we're gonna pop this out really quickly so you can kind of see what it looks like. So we've already done the burrito sewing on that. And then I'm going to get a knitting needle to just carefully, actually I think that's going to work well. See, I want that corduroy to come over to the wrong side, and I think it just is naturally going to do that. So I lucked out there since I didn't get a chance to understitch that. But there you have the overlap side. Obviously it still needs a good press. Everything's been understitched. So then we will go back and just fold under that seam allowance, and you can slip stitch that shut. You can top stitch it from the right side if you want. I think I'm going to slip stitch mine shut. But let's finish off this other side. So we have all of this sewn, our zipper tape trimmed down, and what we're going to do is we're going to pull this up, wrap this around, like so, match our ends, but I want this to come straight up from the edge. I'm actually going to sew this with the waistband side up because we're going to cut a lot of this off. So I want this side to be pretty flush with that seam there. And this is already understitched, so you want to honor that understitching. So fold that seam allowance over to the facing side. And what I'm going to do is sew just a little bit of what was previously sewn, just like I did on the other side. Obviously, we're coming at this from the opposite direction, because it's the other side. But I'm just going all right. Now, I'm just going to sew straight up. You can mark that in if you're more comfortable. I'm going to trim some of this off, even though I don't normally trim. This is going to be so much bulk. I'm just going to trim some of this off real quick before I check it. I want to leave some, though, just in case I pinch something and got something sewn incorrectly, which happens. So then when we kind of push that out, there we go. That's, I mean, it's a little bit past that zipper, but I mean, that's going to be underneath the underlap. So I'm not too concerned about that. Obviously that needs to be pushed through, but I think that that looks pretty good. So we're going to go back, and then it's nice and pulled under in that little section. So we're just going to go back in there and trim our corners, get some of that bulk out. So I'm just going to trim that. I'm going to trim this corner. And then I'm going to trim this seam here, which is the center back seam. Just a little bit. All right. So now when everything gets turned right side out, there you have it. That is what that looks like. So when we, obviously now, I mean, I still need to give a good, now would be the time I would go and give this all a good press. And I would also tuck in the rest of the seam here and then just slip stitch that closed all the way around the inside edge of the skirt and just slip stitch that closed. And then from the right side, you've got, obviously that will be stitched down. You've got this finishing right at the top, the center of the zipper, and then I'm going to put 2 skirt hook and eyes here and then there, so then that just closes over like so, and there you go. So I still need to work my corners out a little bit better and give everything a good press, but then yeah, just add a little hook and bar, 2 of them probably, because that's a pretty wide waistband on either side, and my skirt's ready to go. Give it a hem and it's all ready to go. So that is a slot zipper.